do a Twitter and to show you
Twitter.
the 18 arrondissement here in Paris, in France. And I want you to see what I saw today. You will not believe it. It's kind of shocking.
Paris. Smell the snails. It goes on, but there's basically, it turns into a dump at the further it goes down. I'm not even joking. There were places in Zimbabwe which looked better. So that was Paris. This is now London. A Japanese man shocked that how few white British people make up the country there.
白人の割合が 36.8?
はい。イギリス人のですね。
はい。いや、もっと多いと思ってたから、パーセンテージって割合は少ないかなと僕は思いました。今聞いて。
そうですね。より多いイメージありましたね。
60から70ぐらいあるかなと思ってました。
あ、3分の1にまで減りましたらどう思いますか？
ね、まあ大変なことやなって、まあ驚く、びっくりする。はい、
もしそうなったらポジティブと思いますか、もしくはネガティブと思いますか？
僕は古い考えはネガティブと思います。
なんでですか？
なんでですか？大阪でも結構旅行者、サイトシーイング観光で来ている人はええけど、住んでる人はそんなに多くないと思うんです。でだからどないか3割言うたらもう会う人がほとんどもう外国人の方になったら、日本って大丈夫かなって僕も古い人間やから。
It's old-fashioned to have Japanese people in your city. It's like that's where we're moving it.
Yeah. Well, it brings up what you said earlier. You know, they're just not having babies in the UK. So how do you support the system? You bring in foreigners. You have to replace the population somehow to look after the older population, which kind of reminds me a little bit what our current government is doing with the same thing with immigration. Is they've brought in more people to make our GDP look better. It's not actually better, but our actual individual share of the GDP has gotten smaller. So we're actually worse off, but by having more people, they can create the illusion of that growth in our GDP. And it's like, oh no, we're on the right track, where it's not. It's just going to continue to steamroll as we move forward.
It's also about keeping wages down as well. I mean, one of the functions of immigration, as we all know that if you've got a surplus, an oversupply of workers, wages can be kept low. And one of the reasons wages in Australia were were the highest wages in the world throughout about half of our history was because you couldn't find anyone to do anything because we were so far away from everywhere. No one wanted to come over here. And so those who were here, who wanted to be farmhands or who were some sort of labourer or tradesperson, they could charge whatever they wanted because there was really no competition. So immigration keeps wages low. That's one of the. A lot of this is just driven by big business, and so in America, both parties have kind of colluded with one another to keep the borders open, and that was one of the things that the MAGA movement tried to stop because the Republican elites liked open borders because it meant you had a whole bunch of undocumented workers coming in. You could pay them whatever you wanted. And then, of course, the Democrats liked it as well because they put faith in the possibility that eventually they'll start voting Democrat.
Bernie Sanders at one point said, it's a Koch brothers conspiracy, what they're doing, bringing out all these cheap workers. The Koch brothers being a big Republican donors for their...
He was right. That was one of a couple of things he was right about. He was right about a few things, old Bernie Sanders, God bless him.
And then overnight the wall became racist.
That's right, But and this is the thing, no one's got a solution to any of this. Now, Viktor Orban in Hungary is basically scrapping income tax for any family that has, I think, 4 children. But we've really got to come up with really meaningful ways for people to encourage people to have children. Now, this Japanese man, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if he knows this or not, the Japanese population is plummeting. And they're going to wind up the same way. The average family in Japan has 1 child. That's not replacement level. we've got to be having at least 3 children.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Same. China on a slightly different level. They're experiencing a population problem because of the one-child policy, because they had too many people. So they said, well, you can only have one. So a lot of female babies were murdered at birth or aborted before they were born, because everyone wanted a male, because you want a male to carry on your line. So all of a sudden they've got an excess population of men, which means that the next generation's going to get smaller. They got rid of the policy, but they got rid of it too late, and now all of a sudden they're experiencing that problem. And on the flip side to wages, one of the things that happened here in Australia is particularly with like minimum wage and things like that. There were jobs that we used to have which were never about making a living. So, you know, kids would go and work at McDonald's or supermarket or some fast food joint. They would get paid, $5, $10 an hour, not a lot of money, but they would get work experience. They'd get out there. They would gain experience and knowledge, so that once they got out of school into the workforce, they had experience behind them, and they became. But all of a sudden, with these laws, suddenly these jobs, they expected you to be able to have make a living off it. So then the wages went up, and when the wages go up, they don't want these young people in these jobs because they don't have experience. Where these jobs were all about giving them experience, now all of a sudden they're becoming adults, they're going to the workforce, they don't have experience, they haven't worked growing up because there's no opportunities, because no one wants to pay a child an adult wage.
Why would you?
Yeah, and it's just, and it's the opposite end of, keeping wages low. It brings up the lower wages high and the higher wages low, and it jams us in this spot that, we have difficulty getting out of.
It's the principle of unintended consequences, a key factor in conservative political thinking. That even the best usually the best intentions will wind up with the worst consequences. Raise minimum wage, fine. Doesn't mean you're able to keep all your employees.
Yeah.
So you might find out of 10, 6 are being paid better, the other 4 are looking for another job.